Hello, I'm Dana. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. I am back for another reading of my book, 7 Years to Surrender, My Journey to Faith. This is a series where I am reading my book chapter by chapter and giving a recap of that chapter. So if you're interested in this, please stay tuned. I have a link to all of the previous chapters down in the description below. I am currently on chapter 8, Hello, Cincy. I think this chapter is a little lighter than the previous 3 or 4 have been. So yeah, I am uh, excited to read this chapter because I love Cincinnati. So yeah, my book has been out for 4 months now. I had my first book signing on this past Saturday. I just did a video on that. You can check that out on my channel. So yeah, the book signing went amazing. It was sort of an afterthought. I didn't have in my mind, like I've been taking this journey step by step, like put the book out, start pushing it through social media, which I have been doing. Then I got the idea to do this series where I'm reading it chapter by chapter. And right after I put the book out, people started asking me if I was going to do a book signing. So I started planning for that. So that was an afterthought. But it went great. And yeah, I don't want to talk too much about it because I just did a whole video about it. This is a video about me reading my book. I've just been so overwhelmed by this book and this journey of faith and the things that I have learned, the things that I am still learning, things that are being revealed to me even since the book signing is just opening my eyes to so many different things. It's allowing me to see that people are not okay with you sharing your secrets, and they're definitely not okay with sharing theirs. I understand that, but I have no regrets about exposing my secrets, exposing everything that I put in this book, because I know that it was an act of obedience. And because of who I am, I've always been a private person. I never really had a relationship with God where it was about obedience. It's like that just wasn't the type of relationship that I had with God. And because my relationship has grown and it's more intimate and it's it's so much more than I ever thought. I never thought I could have this type of relationship with God. And knowing that, I know that He guided me in this whole endeavor, and He told me exactly what to put in it. Even when I tried to take things out, I know that this was all part of the surrender. People just weren't ready. They weren't ready for this. The truth shall set you free. I was actually asked the question that even though this exposing these secrets set me free, did I actually consider other people? And it was like, absolutely. And if you read the book, you would see that. You would know that this wasn't just something that I just one day jumped up and did. It was very artfully crafted. It was very well thought out. And I have no regrets about anything that I have talked about in this book. And even going forward, I'm just not a person that will do anything haphazardly. I take care in everything that I do and everything that I say. And I don't just put anything out here because I know you can't undo something that you put out on the internet. I consider myself, I consider my family, and I consider everyone involved. But I still can't allow others to keep me in a box because I have a father. God is my father, and I trust his leading and his direction and the relationship that I have cultivated with him. I also trust my husband, and he gives me the freedom to be who I am because we have that type of relationship where we communicate and everything is out on the table. I also trust my pastor, who is also my brother, and he allows me to be me as well. He gives me the freedom. And just the fact that I put my book out in November of 2025 because I was obedient to God, and my brother did approve it. He did tell me to go forth. Uh, and then for me to put out my book and expose myself. And then 2 months later, he announces to the church that he was making me and my husband pastors. Had I known that, I may not have put the book out because that was definitely not the trajectory that I saw myself on, becoming a pastor. My husband has always been called to be a pastor, and I was always supportive of that. Um, I have been growing in the ministry myself over the past 3 years, but I still would not have guessed that I would have this title now, and for it to come after I exposed this book of surrender and secrets. So I know it was the leading of God even before I was made pastor. I know this book was led by God, and he directed me in everything that I put in it. So just wanted to put that out there. I've seen a lot of truth come out, and it's not been spoken, but it's been revealed very clearly. And I'll get into it later. I know I'm being a little cryptic, but it'll all come out. It'll all be revealed one day. So maybe in the next book. All right, let me get started reading. Hello, Cincy. In my late 20s through my mid 30s, I wouldn't have called myself a deeply spiritual person. I had a relationship with God, yes, but it wasn't intimate. It was more like a familiar distance. I knew he was there, but I just wasn't always reaching for him. I remember talking to my brother Stone one day about the idea of moving out of Michigan. I don't remember what sparked it, but once the thought entered my mind, it lingered. I didn't know where I'd go. I just knew I didn't want to stay still forever. At the time, I was working for a small web design company in Michigan, doing accounting while finishing my degree. I had big plans: earn my CPA, work at one of the big four accounting firms, and build a life I was proud of. But that job, I couldn't stand. I was counting down the days until I could leave. I'd been casually applying to jobs through career sites, but one day I thought, why not go straight to the source? I searched the websites of the actual Big Four firms, and to my surprise, came across a job posting at the Detroit office of one. No CPA required. I didn't fully understand the role, but I knew I could learn it. I applied. Days later, they called for an interview. I was shocked but hopeful. I left work early, sneaking away in my best interview professional attire. The first round went well, but I had no idea if I had nailed it. Then came the call for a second interview. Another stolen afternoon, another round of strategic excuses. My boss wasn't fooled. When I gave my 2-week notice, he admitted he knew something was up. After that second interview, they called back with an offer. But there was a twist. Another candidate, one who already worked with the firm, had also been chosen. The company asked if I'd be open to relocating to Cincinnati. Cincinnati. I had no ties there. I had only been there once. But I also didn't have kids. I wasn't married. And here I was, offered a position at my dream company with the exact salary I'd asked for. Something inside me whispered go, so I said yes. The days leading up to the move were surreal. I felt excited, anxious, proud, and completely unprepared for what was coming. Before the move, my family met for a farewell dinner. We went around the table, sharing words and memories. And when it was my turn to speak, I tried to be strong. But before I knew it, I was crying hard. I hadn't even realized how emotional I felt until the words got caught in my throat. I was stepping into something brand new and leaving everything familiar behind. This was a huge leap of faith. I didn't know how well I would do in my new role, or if I would even like Cincinnati. My soul needed to push me out of my comfort zone. But why? A couple of weeks before my official move, I drove down to Cincinnati to look for an apartment. This was before smartphones became standard. There was no GPS, no Google Maps. I had printed MapQuest directions from one complex to the next. The day before I arrived, a snowstorm hit. Navigating an unfamiliar, snow-covered city with paper printouts, a full-blown nightmare. After getting lost several times and nearly giving up, I found a Best Buy and made one of the best purchases of my adult life, a GPS. That little black screen with its robotic voice became my travel companion, guide, and savior for the next 2 years. I narrowed it down to 2 apartments. One had on-street parking, the other had off-street. I didn't know what parking would be like in a new city, but I didn't want the daily stress of searching for a spot. I picked a place with off-street parking, a simple decision, but one that gave me peace. That Easter weekend, I moved. A new life officially began. I settled into Cincinnati quickly. I was enjoying my job, traveling for work, and even more so for fun. With so many cities just a few drive away, I took weekend getaways, explored new restaurants, and tried all kinds of foods. I found a church I loved, and I met people who poured into me. I felt free. Cincy didn't owe me a thing. I loved her, and she loved me back. This was, I think about Sex in the City when I read this chapter because Carrie Bradshaw in Sex in the City just loved New York. It was like New York was a character in her story, and that's how Cincinnati was for me. People called it Cincy for short, and that's why I called this chapter Hello Cincy. So when I think back on this chapter, like I said, even before I started reading the chapter, that I didn't have a super spiritual relationship with God. I always had God in my life, and I felt His presence and I felt His guidance all my life. But it wasn't like when you grow up in the church and everything is super religious. This was my opportunity to live without the barrier of religion and having a fear-based relationship with God. So starting off from that standpoint, that viewpoint, it opened me up to just living. And I remember being at the job that I was at. I think I had been there a couple years, and I was just doing just basic accounting work. It wasn't anything super hard. I got there when I was supposed to. I left when I was supposed to. There was no overtime required. It was a small company. Everybody there was pretty friendly. The different departments were pretty siloed. We would come together, for special events or whatever, or you would see somebody from another department in the kitchen or whatever common space that we had. I remember a lady that I used to work with. She was actually related to the owner, so of course she had a sense of entitlement. So there was some friction probably months after I had been there, and I don't know what triggered the friction, but I just wasn't in a I never was a person to like confrontation. I never, like, if something bothered me, I would just basically shut down and ignore you. That was my way of dealing. So it became stressful in the latter months. I really had a distaste for her, to put it simply. And I also knew that wasn't a place that I was going to be forever, clearly. I wanted to get my degree. I wanted to have bigger and better. So I started searching for jobs in the area, through whatever mediums that were available at the time, like Career Builder, or um, my school actually had like a database where you could go and search for jobs and apply for them. And then one day something hit me, and I realized that I could actually log on to the actual companies and of the big four accounting firms, because that was my dream job, to work for one of the big four. And so I applied to them directly. I think originally I felt, or I thought, that to work for one of the big four companies, you had to have a CPA, you had to have your master's degree, all of that. And so when I looked at the postings, the job listings, I realized that you didn't have to have the CPA. I can't remember if I had my bachelor's at that time or not. I believe I did, but I continued to work for my master's, and then also sit for my CPA, which I did. I never did pass, by the way. Spoiler, I never did get my CPA. I did sit for some of the exams, and I studied, and I always like to tell this story. I was so serious about passing the CPA that I gave up Christmas. I skipped Christmas. I didn't go home, which I usually went home, because I started sitting for it when I moved to Cincinnati. And I gave up Christmas one year to focus on studying so that I could pass my exams. And I still didn't. And I think that was it. I was done. I had all the study material. I had all the time to study. And I think I had set for two or three of the exam, because there used to be four parts of the exam that you had to sit for. And I think I set for two or three, and I didn't pass, so I was done. So thankfully, this job didn't require that, which was, like I said, I thought you had to have a CPA to work for one of the big four companies. So when I saw the description of this job, it seemed like it was doable. I figured I'd just apply and see what happened. I was actually interviewing for some other companies in the area as well. And I remember at the time that I was deciding on whether to move to Cincinnati or stay in Michigan. There was another offer on the table for another company. It was an insurance company, I believe. And they were offering me about the same amount, I want to say. And so when I sat with it, and I was just thinking, like, do I really want to move? Like, just thinking about the idea. Because, like I said, I had talked to my brother about it. And so I guess that was the seed planted. But I never, like, actively look to move outside of Michigan. So when the opportunity presented itself, it was like, wow. um, like just going over all of the pros and cons and whether it was the right decision or not, whether it was uh, meant for me to go or not, whether it was God. Like, I didn't overthink it. Like I said, even though I had a relationship with God, like I wasn't in prayer for days searching for an answer. But I do remember while I was thinking, I think between the first and the second interview, or maybe waiting to see uh, whether they were going to offer me the position or not, I was listening to an audiobook. And I was at work one day and I had my headphones on, and I remember this book saying something about Cincinnati. And it was like, it was so it was so random. And I was like, of all cities that this book could be talking about, I can't even remember what the book was called, but for it to say Cincinnati, and I was at this crossroad of deciding whether to move. It was just like, this was my dream job. And to be honest, I really didn't want to work in Detroit. And so when they did offer me the Cincinnati position, I was just thinking, like, I mean, it was totally unknown. It was a total wow factor of staying in Michigan versus going to Cincinnati. But hearing Cincinnati in that audiobook, it triggered me. It shifted something in me. It was no, like, since I didn't have any attachments, I wasn't married, I wasn't in a relationship, I didn't have any kids. It was a far enough that I wouldn't get any surprise visitors, but it was a close enough so that if I got homesick, I could always drive home. It was a 4-hour drive to get back to Michigan. So those factors, I considered all of that. It was in 2008. That was a big factor too. If you remember, 2008 is when we had that huge economic uh, recession. And for me to now have the option of choosing between two jobs, it was a total toss up. But the fact that I was able to make this huge move in 2008, when all of the economy was going downhill and I was thriving, because not only was I able to get this job, they offered me a salary. And after I thought about it, it was close to the salary that the insurance company was offering me in Michigan. And so I requested more money, since I was uprooting my whole life to relocate. I just threw it out there just to see, okay, do they really want me? It was kind of like my last ditch effort to see if this was going to be the right fit, because it wasn't a ton of money that I was asking for. And they said yes. So that was my last deciding factor in the decision. So I started packing and getting ready to move. Then we went out. I went out with my family several weeks before the move. And that was it got emotional quick. Like, I never had considered myself a crybaby, but in that moment, it got, it got real quick. I don't even remember what I said, and like just hearing everybody, and I was just like, this is really happening. That's what I was thinking, and it just hit me all at once, because I've just always been the type of person that moved how I felt. I didn't like overthinking things. I just felt like, okay, it's time to move, or whatever. So when I went down to look for the apartment, I went down by myself. I don't know if, well, my brother was, he was married at the time, and I don't know if he couldn't go with me. I can't remember. But that's another thing. I've always been used to moving by myself. One reason is because I've traveled with people before, family, friends, and I had several occasions where it just really ruined me for traveling with people. So think I had debated getting a GPS before I left, but they were pretty expensive then. And I didn't really have the money, the cash to get it. And then I didn't really know if it was going to be beneficial or not. I tried it by printing out the directions. I had set up several appointments with apartment complexes. So I just kind of mapped it out to get to one apartment to the next. And yeah, it was a nightmare. Even looking back at the whole how Cincinnati and the area I was in is set up, I do not know, but I thank God that I was able to get to the Best Buy and then be able to navigate the rest of my time in the city. But that was by far the best decision, the best purchase. So in having that, it just relieved me on so many levels. I think I went down there on a Saturday. They had just got a snowstorm. Most of it had melted by the time I had gotten down there, at least on the highways and the main streets. Before I went, the girl that I ended up, who is now my friend, I had spoken to her and she was telling me the different areas that I should look for apartments in. I was only looking for a 1-bedroom apartment. The 2 apartments that I was deciding on, they were actually right across the street from each other. The other apartment that I was debating on had off-street parking, but you could purchase a parking spot. That apartment was really cute. It was so quaint. It was kind of rustic, but there were just certain things that I was just like, well, one thing, it was on maybe the 3rd or 4th floor. I was thinking how it would be to have to carry groceries because it didn't have an elevator. Other things, other aesthetics that I thought about and considered for both places. So yeah, it was an emotional time. It was an exciting time, a huge leap of faith. That was probably the first time that I took that type of leap. And like I said, it was like my soul was pushing me out of my comfort zone. And I think that's how I've always lived my life, pushing myself unconsciously outside of myself, if that makes sense. Even when I moved, I don't want to jump ahead, but yeah, I still miss it. We still go back to visit. I'm still close to my friend that I worked with for the 5 years that I was at this accounting firm. It was an experience. I could go on and on talking about Cincinnati. It was beautiful. I enjoyed it. I thoroughly explored Cincinnati. Because it's so close, I can still always visit. And I've made Tim a lover of Cincinnati as well. So, yeah, that last sentence was everything. Cincinnati didn't owe me anything. I loved her and she loved me back. With that, I will leave you there. Like I said, the previous 7 chapters, the links are below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye.